Green light go, that's all I know. And when I roll, I'm in control. Don't matter what they say, no, I don't care. Ain't gonna walk away until I'm there. Move all day and I never get tired. Move all day and I never give up. Move all day and I never get tired. Move all day and I never give up. Won't stop till I get that. I won't stop. Won't stop till I get that. Till I get that. Get that. Won't stop till I get that. I won't stop. Won't stop till I get that. Till I get that. Get that. Move all day and I never get tired. Move all day and I never give up. Won't stop till I get that. I won't stop. Won't stop till I get that. Won't stop till I get that. Till I get that. Get that. Get that.
So welcome everybody. Welcome to this this very timely 5G symposium from Mobile News, and hats off to Ian and his team for lining up what is really a stellar panel here today. And as I say, incredibly timely as the networks here in the UK are trialling and on the cusp of launching and rolling out 5G services. So what is 5G going to bring us? What are some of the services? That's what we're going to cover today. But if we look at the promise, we look at all of the hype and expectations that are being set around 5G, we're looking at things like enhanced mobile broadband, which is promising data, peak data rates of up to 10 gigabits a second for data, for example, and possibly even higher. We're looking, as the standard develops into next year, at new capabilities like ultra-reliable, low-latency services for things like autonomous driving in the future, for virtual reality, augmented reality, and for all sorts of immersive experiences in the future. We're looking with that. There's a lot of big network capabilities that are coming with the 5G standard, whether that's the sort of ultra-high traffic capacities, whether that's the significant sort of mass device connectivity that it's going to bring. But it will also bring benefits for the networks in terms of lower costs of deployment and energy savings. There's a host of features, functionalities, capabilities coming with the 5G standard. That all sounds great, doesn't it? But there's some burning questions, and that's why we've lined up the guys that are responsible here for delivering those networks. Some of the big questions, not least, what are the benefits to consumers beyond what they already have today with 4G? What are they going to see that's a tangible leap forward? What are the critical technology challenges you guys have been facing with standardization and face with the network deployments? How are you going to balance creating mass excitement and hyping the technology with making sure that devices come to the market at the right time? How are you going to attain that critical mass market? And, particularly on devices, what are they going to look like? What are the margins for the channel? What are the services going to look like in retail? What are they going to look like in enterprise, for example? So very quickly, Ian mentioned who we have on the panel, but I'll just explain their roles. And the guys delivering the networks we'll start with, we've got Brendan O'Reilly, who's the Chief Technology Officer for O2 Telefonica UK. Scott Petty, who is the CTO UK at Vodafone. Phil Shepherd, who is Director of Strategy and Architecture at 3. Howard Watson, CTIO, Chief Technology and Information Officer at BT and EE. And we have Ben Wood, who's Chief of Research at CCS Insight. So he's the guys that keep these guys honest and watch them and challenge them, importantly. And Kate Beaumont, welcome to you all. Kate's the Director of Strategy, Product Planning at Samsung. Yes. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for giving up the time and being bold enough and brave enough to come here to this 5G question time. I'm sure you all have questions, and I want this to be interactive, so don't be shy in holding your hand up and asking questions. It's not about my questions here, and I've got many, but I'll be looking to the floor for many of them. And we're going to start with a question, a very hot, topical question right now. Bushin Patel?
Thank you. Hi, thank you. I think it's more to Scott's, and a lot of people have commented about this, is around the concept of, the concerns and controversies surrounding some technology vendors and the security around Huawei. And it is quite a big footprint. how does that controversy impact the investment plan, and will it delay? Will it slow down? Your take on it, please.
Sure. You're going to have easy questions today, I can see. So I think, look, first of all, as an operator, we need a really healthy vendor ecosystem. That means we need choice. We need to ensure that we drive interoperability through our estate and use that choice to make sure our standards as an industry to continue to develop. One of the beauties of the mobile industry is the degree of standardization, the flexibility we have in the vendors that we choose and the way that we put those together. So that ecosystem health is really, really important to us. Huawei is a great vendor. We use them in all 27 of the markets that Vodafone operate in around the world. And technically, they would rate as a top 2 vendor in virtually every network domain. So having them as part of our ecosystem is really important to us, and hence why we participate with NCSC and things like the oversight boards, etc., to guarantee that. Each country has to make an assessment based on the risk related to the vendors they use for the parts of the network they want to use them in. Broadly, we look at it this way. In the radio access network, there are 2 types of risks you're trying to manage. One is, can you protect consumer data at that point, or could a foreign state take down your network? The radio access network we assess, along with the government, is actually quite low risk. I've got 20,000 base stations. If I wanted to steal your data, going to a radio base station, hacking it, hoping that you come past that base station, gathering your data, which is probably encrypted anyway, is a pretty inefficient way to steal someone's information because of the distributed nature of those elements. So the risk of that kind of attack is quite low. Equally, the risk of a foreign state being able to take down your entire base station infrastructure is also low because it's protected by a set of IPsec gateways, and you would have to do that 18,000 times. That's a really inefficient way to try and take down a network. So our view is using Huawei in the radio access network is low risk. They're a really strong vendor for virtually everybody in 4G. As everybody knows, the first releases of 5G are non-standalone. They require 4G to deploy. So we think that's a really safe decision to make. Likewise, in the transport network, the risk probably goes up a little bit, but not substantially. Yes, there are points of aggregation. You could potentially steal more data, but it's all encrypted by the IPsec gateway, so less valuable to you. And we have a lot of resilience in the network. So if you manage to get into a particular aggregation box, you wouldn't be able to get very far, and we can route around that. When you get to the core, that's a totally different scenario. The core is the place you would go to achieve both of those 2 things. If I wanted to gather large amounts of information, sensitive information, admittedly, it's all encrypted. You would need a lot of compute power to break that. But let's be honest, foreign states that we see attacking the UK infrastructure have the compute power and the resources to do that. So our decision in the UK was that Huawei was not a vendor that we should be using in the core. That limits our ecosystem, unfortunately, so we don't have the flexibility we would like. But it gives us the balance that I think will keep the UK safe from a security point of view.
Great, thank you. And Phil and Howard, you obviously have two other operators here that use Huawei. Anything to add to that? I mean, what is, in terms of if there is a ban in future, what is that limitation to essentially two vendors going to do? Is that going to curtail innovation significantly?
I mean, one of the great things actually is we're all pretty aligned on this. And Scott and I spend quite a lot of time ensuring we get an aligned message across, which I think is good for our industry. And I would prioritise it from our point of view, which is, you know, the way at BT we look at this is absolutely number one priority is the security of the nation. And we work really closely with NCSC and government on ensuring that, you know, that continues to be the top priority, and we're leaning heavily into the DCMS supply chain review that everybody will be aware of is happening right now. Yeah. The second priority, though, is ensuring that we bring the best innovation on the planet into the UK market to make the UK PLC the best place for the digital economy. And we absolutely believe that to do that effectively, we do need the ability to use, in a very carefully selected way, as Scott very well described, from an architectural point of view, Huawei as a vendor.
They've been right out front, haven't they? I mean, they've been one of the real trailblazers in 5G for the last few years, infrastructure-wise. Yeah,
and we see them, you know, probably initially 18 months ahead. You know, maybe that's shortening a little bit as things develop, but you know, they have some particular sweet spots, one of which is being very good at modulation techniques around radio, massive MIMO capability, and to block that out from us will do a disservice to the UK economy. Also back to I guess, the question you actually asked. We also think that the reality of reducing our ecosystem down to 2 vendors will inevitably mean that we will be paying more for equipment.
And that will eventually find its way down.
And
to
that
the consumer.
will ultimately flow through to the customer and the broader economy.
Yeah. Anything to add, Phil? Are you completely disaligned?
I guess it's an unusual situation of being 100% aligned with my colleagues here. Exactly what Scott said in terms of taking a balanced view on risk and what things are risky and what not. We've done exactly the same decisions, really, that they have. Equally agree with the fact that if you want 5G launched now with innovation and with advanced technologies, then it would be very problematic to ban a vendor who is quite advanced like Huawei. So basically, full agreement. Okay. So we wait that government review. That's sort of expected, in the next couple of months?
I mean, we hope that, the short answer to that is yes. I think the challenge will, of course, be that the professionals who are doing the work on that will make a recommendation, I think, well within that time frame. Whether it gets lost at a political level in other events, we hope not, because we do need an outcome pretty soon.
Yeah. The impact of swapping is huge. We run 4G networks using Huawei equipment in parts of our network. You're talking hundreds of millions to replace that. We can't deploy 5G without 4G. You can't run one 5G vendor attached to another 4G vendor. That doesn't technically work. So we would essentially slow down our deployments 18 months to 2 years, and the money that we would spend on 5G, we would be spending on 4G swap. The UK would lose its leadership position, certainly in Europe, in terms of 5G. If you look at the world map, clearly China is leading in 5G deployment. A couple of other countries in Asia. The UK is actually not that far behind. We're really, and certainly leader from a European point of view. That creates opportunities for investment, creating incubation of applications. And we're a million miles ahead of the US. If we were to swap, we'd be laggards, and many other countries would go past us, and we'd lose that economic opportunity, which would be disappointing. Hence why that was the elephant in the room question, and I think it is. It does have potentially that impact as we go forward, if that's the way it goes. Let's hope not. So let's get on to more positive things, and let's talk about some of the capabilities. Now, I mentioned a few of them earlier, most of which will come with enhanced mobile broadband this year. Let's start with Brendan, because you've been sat there patiently listening to that. I completely disagree about that. Well, good luck with the 2 suppliers you have. But what do you think are going to be the game changers here of all those capabilities, and some coming this year, some as the standard progresses next year? What do you think? What are you most excited about in terms of 5G? For me, actually, the technology itself isn't the most exciting thing about 5G. It's the opportunity that it brings, because mobile underpins the 5G economy in a way that it didn't do 10, 15 years ago. If you think about the way that we run our businesses, the way that we live our lives, mobile is one of the biggest contributors to the British economy. And the fact that, as Scott said, the UK is at the forefront of Europe, and we're seeing 5G deployments coming this year is very, very exciting. But the reason why it's exciting is that we can build a 5G economy based on those capabilities. So, you mentioned ultra reliable, low latency for autonomous vehicles. That's an exciting area. But the efficiencies will gain from capacity, being able to run millions of IoT devices. That's really exciting. But it's what it means for other businesses, and that's why when I think about 5G, I think about four areas. It's coverage, which I'm sure we will discuss at some point. You need to get the 5G coverage out there to be able to use it. It's about capacity and enhancing that capacity. It's about collaboration, and collaboration in a way that maybe we haven't done before. So collaboration with other businesses. We've been working with some of the FTSE 100 companies about what digital means for them, what 5G can bring to their businesses. But the most important one is customer. And customers need to want it for it to make sense. Yeah. And that's actually what we're concentrating on now. What are the use cases that will get customers excited enough to believe some of the hype without getting too carried away? Let's come back to the sort of expectations and how you're managing that. So, within that, can you just, we'll go around each of them, but where are you with 5G in terms of trials, deployment? What have you announced so far? Maybe? Yeah, so we've been working, we've got a test bed at the O2 Arena, where we've been trialling some mobile edge computing bits and pieces. We've been involved with Millbrook, the autonomous vehicle trial in Milton Keynes.
And we've announced that we'll be bringing 5G to the four corners of the UK this year. That's Cardiff, Belfast, Edinburgh, and London, I think it was.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, Scott, the two-part question there was, what are you most excited about in terms of the 5G capabilities and what it can do? And the second part is, where are you currently?
I think the two features of 5G we're really excited about is the IoT capability, the ability to build new applications and services we just can't do today in 2G, 3G and 4G. Their consumption of resources is too high. And we think creating an ecosystem for those applications to be developed will be super interesting. And low latency. And the consistency of the latency will open up a whole set of new applications for consumers in things like mobile gaming, augmented reality, in enterprise applications, in factory automation, in media for online broadcasting, etc. So leveraging those kind of capabilities will create new applications and hopefully new sources of reason for people to use our mobile networks.
Yeah. And Phil, for 3, your perspective. Sorry, did you say where you are currently? I didn't.
We've announced a bunch of cities and towns, as Howard rightly corrected me. Reading's not. Turns out Reading's not a city, which
New regard. There you go.
The primary reason we did that was actually trying to create a broad enough ecosystem to allow people to start developing their 5G ideas, particularly around IoT, and have a real-world environment to test that in. And we think that will create the opportunity for industry to start really building real ideas that they can take to market and be confident that there'll be a big enough coverage in the country to sell their products.
Great. Phil? Sorry.
I've been through 3G launch and 4G launch with 3. I've been a while, and it's just trying to figure out what's hype and what's not hype is quite important. But from a genuine technical perspective, 5G is a big leap forwards. It is going to be a lot faster and it's going to be a lot lower latency. So with any step change like that, you see opportunities for new applications developing and new ideas. For ourselves, we've just sort of demonstrated a few of those. We've demonstrated real-time gaming to mobile broadband forum last year. Esports, Fortnite, if those who play Fortnite, that was demonstrated last November. And then we've also looked at
what sort of numbers did you have around that? Just out of interest.
Numbers in terms of
how many people were playing.
Oh, this is a demonstration. This is a pro gamer basically. At
right, so it was just
had a demonstration.
A first 5G.
So it just to show, the very first game. I don't know if you played Fortnite before. You get 100 players and you're the last one standing. He actually won the first game whilst over a 5G network. So the latency must be pretty good to actually managing to do that. So it's quite a good demo. And we've also done augmented reality demonstrations at London Fashion Week as well. So these are just like teasers and ideas as to what could develop. The other piece we're focusing on is fixed wireless access, so a broadband replacement essentially. And we, as you probably know, we purchased UK Broadband as a Relish brand, and we're looking to use some of those sites initially in London to demonstrate and test out fixed wireless access and see how good that is. I think the extra spectrum and capacity and performance of 5G gives an opportunity to really offer broadband in more places
and get it out there faster.
Get it out there faster and get it there more usable, if you like, and a real competitor.
So Howard, now you've got BT fixed infrastructure up and down the country. You've got EE. You've got a delicate balance to make here. We'll talk about that in terms of fibre rollouts and 5G mobile, etc. later on. But back to the sort of core question, so we keep everybody on the same track here.
Yeah, I mean, let me start with the second piece first, and I'll answer the first question. So, we have 9 sites live right now. We have a small number of trial customers on, mainly businesses at this stage because they're in and around London. Yeah. We have announced that we will launch 16 cities, 1,500 locations this year, and you'll have seen a whole stream of consumer and business device announcements that we made following Mobile World Congress. So, it is on the verge of happening here. I think the use cases, there are many, and, we will exploit the sort of 3 apexes of the triangle around enhanced mobile broadband, ultra low latency and reliability, and massive IoT. I think, we had this 5G in a booth in Canary Wharf. We had 84 large multinational customers come through that over a period of 6 weeks. I think actually the sooner we build relationships as an industry, and much closer relationships than we historically have had with some of those customers, we will start to see lots of great use cases in the sort of enterprise area, and also some great verticals. I think things like healthcare, things like transport, security, etc., are all, I think, real game-changing opportunities for us. If I would say that, probably, and it links to the point that you said you'll ask me about later, I think the biggest opportunity for us is how we use 5G as an opportunity to get true convergence between an ultra-fast fixed network and a very fast mobile network, to give customers a real sense of seamless connectivity, and that's what we're heavily focused on.
Yeah, that's a good point about partnerships, relationships with other verticals. I think Nick Reed made a big point of that at MWC recently, that the operators have got to get out of those siloed way of focusing on the market and look to others to work with and collaborate more effectively.
I think that there's a near-term point though, Mark, which is, much as I prescribe to all of this kind
now
of,
here we go. Here's the devil's advocate.
Well, no, it's more, we can talk about augmented reality and, teletransportation and holograms and all this kind of stuff, but it has to be grounded in the reality of the business case for these guys, which is they've got to sell some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm quite optimistic about the fact that some of the core principles you talk about, like capacity in particular, are really good. I think we have to be very careful with this kind of, multiple gigabytes of stuff. Just getting a reliable 50 megs would be fantastic. And I see 5G for me in the near term, because I think we will move into these whole new ways in which it will change the economy and change industries. But it's just going to be like having a first-class ticket on a network. I think you'll be like in the kind of, business lounge of the network. If you're unfortunate to have to commute in and out of London on a regular basis and sit at King's Cross or Paddington
Newbury.
Newbury's been upgraded to a city and it's going to have 5G, so I'm delighted. But if you're unfortunate to be sitting there, particularly at peak rush hour, and you want to do anything on your phone, there's no capacity because the networks can't cope, no matter how well these guys and their teams architect around that. And with 5G, I think there will be a group of users who will be very, very interested in having that reliable access to a great network all the time. It doesn't have to be that much quicker, and I think that they'll pay a premium for that. And interestingly, I'm very excited about a lot of the kind of mobile broadband devices. So
beyond phones,
EE have got you've got the HTC 5G hub, haven't you? You've got you've got some other stuff I think coming. I think everyone's doing that, and especially in the UK, we've got a market of people who are hooked on iPhone. They're not getting 5G anytime soon, so if they want 5G, they might as well buy a little modem and use that. So near term, I see a great opportunity there.
Let's come back to devices, because I think that's a huge topic in itself, Kate. On my kind of first question, from the vendor side, in terms of supplying these guys with kit and supplying the channel, what are you most excited to be able to bring to the market from Samsung's perspective?
Well, I think what we're really excited about is the door opener. 5G is the door opener for connected living. And we stated a few years ago that all our devices will be connectable by 2020. So this is now where it's really going to start to become a game changer. And I think there's also, we've talked a lot about collaboration. That's really important to us as well. So we know that perhaps consumer take-up might be slow initially. I think the real take-up in 5G is going to be on the B2B side, the enterprise space. Yeah. So one of the things that's key for us is how we're collaborating with, with enterprises. And you've talked about some of the verticals. I think also manufacturing is a key vertical opportunity from a device perspective as well. So we're looking to collaborate there to drive implementation faster.
Yeah. So enterprise first, I think that's kind of, is that going to happen before consumers? Are you expecting there to be enterprise
capacity first?
Capacity first.
The spectral efficiency is trying to fix places like Paddington Station. Yeah. It's incredibly difficult in a 4G world. The technology itself just can't cope with that kind of density. 5G will be a massive enabler for those. So consumers will benefit from that, and we'll probably see them adopt, particularly phones. I think the handset manufacturers are way ahead of where we thought they would be in terms of the release cycle. And I think you'll see a fairly broad range of devices through the summer that will make it attractive to a number of people to upgrade, and they'll want to get access to those capacity benefits.
Yes, I think capacity is a huge issue, and I think Paddington's a great idea, but also once you get on the train, that ability to hand over and stuff much more effectively and have a fast-moving experience of 5G is going to be key, isn't it? But also, I'm thinking about sort of stadias and crowds more generally, and it's going to have a massive impact, isn't it, on things like stadia, where people are trying. Not only these days, you can't probably make a voice call or a text call in some crowded crowded stadia. I know Wembley's probably different, but the
I think capacity
it's going to be
Get 100 megabits per second.
I think capacity is probably the easier way to communicate it to customers, because as Ben said, the speed story is going to be inconsistent from the beginning. Whereas I think capacity is something that we all struggle with, whether you're outside a football game or on a train. So I think that's actually probably, everyone's sort of been talking about, is it speed that's going to be the storyline? And I think that definitely was the case with 4G. But I think when you get to 5G, the more real experience and benefits, I think, that are going to be very tangible will be around capacity.
One of the challenges that I think we face, which could be an opportunity, is things like today will hype what 5G could be. And I think if we follow the same path that we did with 3G, which is overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
Because the promise...
Massively overpromised and underdelivered.
Yeah, the 3G promise was delivered by 4G. So we had to wait for the next generation of technology to deliver.
But it came more stealth-like without the hype. So, you've got to find that balance here with 5G, haven't you? We're getting excitement across and all of these new... And managing expectations, frankly, but also making sure supply of things like devices are in the shops at the right time.
And that's why the challenge could become an opportunity by working with some of the verticals that have been mentioned, by working with businesses and by looking at what the value that can be given to all of the stakeholders there, not just ourselves, not just our customers, but local communities. What can we do from a social point of view? How will technology help enable some of those things? That's the real opportunity for me. And so instead of looking at it like a challenge, I think if we look at it like an opportunity, capacity will be great for customers in near term. But how do we build that economy is really...
So it's more a societal change that it's going to drive. Is that right?
And
more than any other sort of generation we've seen before?
Yeah, I think I do think there's an end-to-end change here, because, for the next few years, 5G is a big construction project. Yeah. And
there's a dose of reality. That's
today 5G antennas are heavier than their 4G counterparts. We've often got to strengthen towers. We've got to move fences because of radiation requirements, and we still have landlords who want an extra pound of flesh. And that is not a sustainable model to get to the great digital country that we want to be.
Increasing, have been sharing networks. I mean, you guys have been sharing masts and stuff, and that's obviously been a bit of a game changer in the last few years in terms of being able to serve particularly rural elements of this country. So is that going to accelerate that approach to sort of working collaboratively in the UK? I
mean, as you say, we effectively have two sharing arrangements between the four of us here.
I thought that's why we were sat the way we were sat.
It's O2 and Vodafone and Free and EE that share masts, obviously.
And I think, we think that works, certainly in our sharing arrangement, that works quite effectively for us. We've looked at, where would we want to build? And there's a great amount of agreement on that. So any opportunity of defraying some of the costs of this big construction project by sharing has to be an advantage. Yeah.
What would help us the most is mast height. Go anywhere else in Europe and their masts are twice the height of ours. Yeah. Every 10 metres you double your coverage.
Right.
Yeah. Let us build taller masts. We'll happily share them.
It's taller masts. Because we've got lower buildings. Is that the issue there?
No, we just have different planning laws to the rest of
25
metres. Most of Europe is 50.
Yeah. But then mast technology's come on and will come on.
Yeah, but the physics of radio transmission hasn't.
Absolutely.
You mentioned trains. If we had 50-metre towers along the train lines, you'd have an unbelievable service. Yeah. At 25-metre towers, it's virtually impossible to get around the cuttings and the tunnels to build that service. It's economically not viable to do that. So they're really simple planning elements that could make a fundamental difference to how we build mobile networks and the quality of those mobile networks.
And that's backed up because I remember being in Korea and talking to one of the Nokia guys there, and he said he'd been there 2 years and he could remember his one drop call, and it was on the fast train. Yeah. And it dropped a call once. And if you go along and if you're on the train there, or if you're on the train in China, there's a mast every 500 metres and it's 50 metres tall. And that's how.
So the consumer will tend to blame you guys, but you're bounded by the regulation more than anything, and you're just not able to put in the kind of mask. And
we're trying to build a digital economy with analogue planning laws. It just doesn't add up.
I'll come to you one sec because I'm looking for questions. So honestly, I'm going to come to you guys in a minute. But how do you drive that? Is it just about continually lobbying the government around these things? How do you?
Well, I think as an industry, we've made positive steps. We share. Yeah. So that means a village needs 2 masts, not 4 masts. That's a positive step forward for us. It helps us from an economics point of view to drive that. Yeah, of course we lobby as hard as we possibly can. communicating the messages that we want. I think as an industry, we could do a much better job articulating the basic physics of the technology that we use and the understanding of that. I don't read many articles in our industry talking about the importance of mast height, the benefits it would add, the coverage capability and the benefits that would create. And I think that's something we should be talking about.
Yeah. There was a chap there.
The frequency of 5G, is it 2.4?
3.4 at the moment.
3.4. Now, okay, if you're on 5G, is it going to automatically drop back to 4G for data and voice? Or how's it going to run?
So at the moment, essentially, we are aggregating. So we're taking multiple carriers of 4G, as we have today, and adding an additional carrier of 5G. So it's a combination as opposed to, a 4G, 3G drop back down.
What's the sort of range of a 5G signal then, in terms of miles or kilometres? How far is it going to travel? How far is that signal travelling?
The way we're looking at the radio planning at the moment, and effectively taking advantage of the MIMO antennas, is essentially from an existing macro site. We believe that the 5G radius will be the same as the existing 4G capability.
Right, so you don't have to put any more cell sites up, or
in most cases, and bear in mind, rightly or wrongly, there's a coverage question, but the initial deployments will typically be in urban areas where there's quite significant overlapping coverage from sites anyway, because it's been driven by capacity.
I think the point you're getting to is about site densification, which is a little bit of a US problem. It's not really a problem for the rest of the world. In the UK, we've already had auctions for mid-band spectrum, which is the 3.4 you're talking about. We'll have an auction later this year or early next year that auctions more mid-band but also low-band, so 700 megahertz. 700 gives us much greater coverage area, and hence will, as Howard said, map to what we have today with 4G. Site densification in the US is a real problem because they don't have available low-band or mid-band spectrum to auction. They only have high-band spectrum to auction. Good thing about high-band, super capacity, super fast. Bad thing about high-band, doesn't go very far. So if you want to have coverage, you need to have a lot more sites. That is primarily a uniquely US problem.
I think just that the thing about 5G is that there's spectrum availability. The 3.4 is fundamentally, in laws of physics, a lower coverage spectrum. But the technology, with particularly the massive MIMO technology with active antennas, allows you to do beamforming and get you the same or similar range to you get for the current 4G coverage. So I think that is a really critical change. That also then requires that you put these bigger, heavier antennas on, and then it requires building and it requires costs on site. So it all leads into the other. But assuming you can get a site and you can get permission and you can build on it, then the technology will allow you to match or even maybe some cases exceed the coverage that you get from 4G.
Yeah. What would you actually say has been it continues to be the biggest technology challenge here with 5G, with deploying it? Is it the planning issues? Propagation, etc.?
Yes, there is that. I would also say that with the possible exception of the gentleman on my right, I think we've messed up spectrum allocation in that it is too fragmented in that mid-band. And I do think, post the next auction, we're going to be doing a lot of conversations as to how do we improve that. You go to China and they will say you need 100 megahertz contiguous spectrum. There's only one of us that has that in the UK.
Yeah. Phil?
Yes, we have 100 megahertz.
I thought he was going to say that.
It's an unusual position to be in because spectrum's been a real challenge for us for many years. On 3G and 4G spectrum, we've been very, very constrained. We made what looks now a very, very good decision to purchase UK broadband and get the spectrum along with that. And it has been put together. I'm sure there'll be discussions on how things can be improved in the future. But for those who don't know, 5G single carrier bandwidth is a maximum of 100 megs, and that's sort of like, if you like, the gold standard, if you like, for 5G, if you can get it.
Right. Probably to help the audience, if you have 100 meg contiguous, that's 10 times more efficient than 4G spectrum on the same amount. If you have 40 megahertz, it's only 4 times more efficient. So there's a big benefit in the amount of contiguous spectrum that you have.
Yeah. I guess that's a common kind of challenge you've all faced. Anything more critical that you're facing?
I think the spectrum's really important. I think the other part comes back to landlords and actually getting the equipment out there. And I think Howard mentioned it earlier on. Landlords wanting their pound of flesh. well, actually, you know, how do we deliver a service that benefits landlords? So how do we help them run their buildings more efficiently? How do we? So I think there's an economy that we can build that we need to get them to be a part of. And the construction industry is a great one where, you know, technology drives a huge amount of processes in construction. Actually, if we were working with the construction industry to make sure that mobile first was in buildings and we were building it from the start rather than coming along at the end, that'd have a massive effect on the UK economy.
So, Phil, I'm going to look at you because you announced in February 4G Plus, which is
Yes.
gigabyte LTE, etc. Is that a sort of a confusing step for customers? You know, when we're just on the cusp of talking about 5G as an industry, you guys are going to be start to market 5G propositions. That coming now, is that a confusing, or do you think that there's enough of a sort of a stepping stone here for you to?
It has the potential to be confusing if you sell it to sort of wrongly. I mean, we've not done the same as tends to have happened in the US, where they name the number of the technology as one more above what it actually is. So they sort of marketed 4G as 5G and a lot, which is a bit crazy. We're not trying to market this as a 4G plus as a 5G technology, but it is a step towards a higher performance. So 4G plus is really just aggregating more 4G spectrum bands, which is what Had was saying. Some of the handsets display 4G plus. When you get on it, it can be a bit confusing. It's a bit of a debate whether you wanted to display it or not, but it certainly does improve performance, and we've seen some quite big performance enhancements by deploying it. It's not replacing 5G, but it's certainly helping to enhance 4G.
And you get a 5G-like experience, quite frankly, on a good gigabit LTE connection. I mean, on the networks when I use it, it's fantastic. I mean, that's where you can be knocking on the door of 150, 200.
Yeah, to be fair to Phil, the vernacular that's confusing is actually the Gs. 4G, 4G plus or LTE advanced and 5G are all just releases of LTE. Each one brings new capabilities and new radio design. So, we would technically talk about it in that way.
So you wouldn't label it 4G plus, you'll just introduce it to give a stealth-like.
Most of us run LTE advanced across most of our networks. Whether marketing choose to use that as an opportunity is up to them. A lot of the 5G problems, though, will be created by the fact that people are talking about things that are coming in future releases of LTE, not the current release of 5G LTE. And we're trying really hard to make sure the messaging separates those two things. So right now it's about capacity, it's about the performance that we can get. Many of the new features, MEC, etc., actually coming in further releases next year and the year after.
Okay, great, yeah. So let's just get on to the channel and consumers, and we can come back to some of the technology issues if we get questions later. But, let's start with the consumer. My kids, I asked them about 5G last night. They are tech-savvy 17, 18-year-olds. They knew nothing about 5G, and they're right on top of stuff. I mean, they're really sort of technophiles, but they just didn't know. When are you going to start talking about 5G very, very prominently in the market? When's your marketing going to kick in? And then when will be the first time that a consumer will be able to walk into retail and actively order?
The point I'd like to get across is the UK is really early in 5G deployment. Yeah, let's be clear, the products aren't generally available yet. The code is not finished. Yeah, so picking exactly when you're going to launch, exactly when you're going to is a little bit risk prone right now. Yeah. So
nobody wants to step out in front.
We want to make sure that we have a really high quality service, that we understand. That's why we've all done trials. That's why we're all launching in places so we can learn to operate. We can validate the code. When we're confident of that, then I think you'll see a huge splash of announcements, etc. And I doubt any of us are going to talk about the really sexy use cases until we actually launch, because otherwise you're going to come to our launch events and go, well, that was a bit boring, you've already spoken about that. So there's going to be a little bit of a window now while we finish the build, while we get stability in the network, while the vendors release their products. And then I think you're going to see, post the summer, in the summer, a huge wave of what the opportunities are there.
I question whether they should care, because 5G is just another thing, right? Should our customers truly care that it's 5G or 4G? What we should be talking about is, this is the service that we can provide you. Yeah. This is the benefit it will bring to you. And therefore, let's talk about that. And all too often as an industry, we talk about the technology and not the outcome that it could drive. And I think the more we talk about the outcome, the more chance we have of that greater collaboration.
So you're talking to consumers now who walk into shops. What is that outcome? What are the benefits you're going to specifically talk to them about if they're thinking about, I've heard about 5G. What's your advice to the channel in terms of
Well, initially, you've got to talk about it in two terms, and I think we've already covered it. In the near term, it's capacity, and therefore you're going to have a great, reliable service. You're going to be able to do the things that you want to do on your handheld device. In the future, it will be about IoT, it will be about mobile edge computing, it will be, autonomous vehicles, but that's stage two, right? So in the near term, we need to talk about the benefits that it will give today, and we can do that, but the benefits it will bring to you. So you've got to have those personal conversations, because one answer doesn't fit all and shouldn't fit all. So that's how we're approaching it.
Ben, what are you looking from the outside in? Because I'm sure these guys won't give me a sort of an individual perspective on what the market might look like, let's say a year after kind of launches at the end of 2020. How many 5G kind of subscribers do we think there might be in the UK?
Well, just on the timing of when I think we'll see 5G in the UK, because it's very commercially sensitive for these guys, because of course everyone wants to be first and everything else. I think the point made about where the standards are and where the readiness is a really important story here, which is there is still work going on just to get the networks to fundamentally work. There's boxes of phones waiting to be tested, but until you've frozen the network and you've got something you can test again, I think I'm right, guys, insofar as you're ready to roll when that's cooked and done. So I would imagine that you'll see something in the summer, but 5G doors open, I think, in the fourth quarter. And although it's very commendable, the kind of objective view of, you shouldn't get hung up on 5G and 4G and everything else, you've got a set of competitors with marketeers who want to sell a service, and it will be 5G, and that will be the story. And that's great, by the way. It is really, really exciting. The fact the UK's first, one of the first is really, really exciting. But I think we should keep our feet on the ground. This is not millions of 5G users by next year. This is a few 100,000 would be a great result. That's where we see it right now. And you can look back at our numbers from a year ago, and I think we were too optimistic. I think it's always important when you sit in the chair I sit in, which is to say when you got it wrong. I think we were ahead of ourselves, but looking at where the technology is, where we're going, it's quite interesting. But then again, you've got Kate here sitting with a 5G handset, which is, once all of that's aligned, it's ready to roll. So this is an encouraging story from Mobile World Congress, which there was a lot, but I know you're going to come to devices. I am
definitely going to come to devices in a minute.
Before we do that, though, I think it's going to come in two phases, really. So you're going to have the early start, call it a soft launch. And like 4G, we're going to learn how consumers are using their devices and what they really think the benefits are. And then I think the marketing stories will build from there. And, one of the great things about being at the forefront of innovation and being in that early phase, because you've got choices. You either come on board when it's mass market or you get in with the early adopters. And that gives us the opportunity to learn and understand how consumers are using their phone, where they really think the benefits are, and then we can design and develop to support those use cases.
And history has shown whenever you give, and again, I think most of these guys have sat through, and I have been lucky enough to be involved in now several generations of technology launch. If you build that capacity, they will come. And they will come. And it's a really terrible. People will sit here and go, "You're crazy." Yeah. But actually, you know what? People find we haven't even thought of how people are going to use it. All the guys can have examples for their launches and everything else. This is going to deliver a whole new way in which you can use this technology, and there's going to be some magical things delivered on 5G because it's a whole new thing.
This is a great point, because I have in my team a team that forecasts usage, capacity usage, and we use it for forecasting our capacity demands and needs and spectrum needs, etc. And I've seen every time we get to a point where maybe the growth slows slightly, some skeptics, if you like, go, well, that's it, that's all you need, that's all the speed you need. Then as soon as you launch a higher speed technology, amazingly somebody thinks of a way of using it. So I've seen the growth of video streaming massively, and now it's going HD, and reliable HD video streaming will of course be an early use case, and Ultra HD, and then just new applications, the gaming and some of the stuff we haven't thought about. So I think it is a case actually. If you put something out there that's better and faster and quicker, you will have unexpectedly new applications. Cloud, just cloud computing stuff is much more.
And the hype
relevant.
seems to have died down around cloud, but this is.
I think and I see this through our fixed network, and in particular our core network. And today we all at home on our fixed network are still using, on average, a factor of 80 times the amount of capacity that a mobile user is using. And we see things, Fortnite is a brilliant example. you know, 1.5 gigabytes for every update. Everybody wants to do it at the same time on the Tuesday it's released. You know, 20% of our core network can be used on one evening during the week, just delivering fortnight updates. So, and it's growing.
My 9-year-old is really pleased.
It's growing 45%, 45% per year.
Astonishing, isn't it?
You know, so.
So, I mean, we've seen video, for example, talking about that, you know, massive uptake globally. Video is that going to be the killer app for 5G, would you say, video overall, in terms of, you know, you're building your networks to deal with people watching?
I've given up calling things killer apps because I don't think there's any such thing as a single killer app. It is a important app. I mean, we've seen probably the biggest growth in traffic in the last few months has been like Champions League football evenings, where people tend to stream live a lot, and you get some big peaks on that. So we want to better support that. But I'd say it's an important use case and service, but not the killer app.
I mean, I think what we think will happen on video, and you know, we're always saying we're thinking, we don't know, is we will see on mobile a shift towards you know, download as opposed to streaming. You know, because so you will download it when you're blessed in a location with great capacity, and you'll be able to do that so quickly that it's worth doing that rather than waiting for streaming.
So do you think we could go back to the old days of people owning content rather than just streaming because the download is so good?
It's the same thing, really.
Yeah, it's the same.
Ultimately, you own the. I mean, I think it's a societal shift.
Yeah,
I mean, we've been on this amazing journey of this like voice interaction with a phone to a visual interaction with a phone, and then that was browsing, and then it was a bit more, and now it's video, and then it's HD video, and you know, my 11-year-old was moaning because he's going on a school trip and using video uses up all his data bundle. You know, and that's you know, he's the next generation, and I think that it's just symptomatic of, you see the trends on the network. That Fortnite soundbite was phenomenal stat. I mean, that, you know, to not take 20% of your capacity on a Tuesday evening, that's bonkers.
I think what 5G does is sort of supports the shift, if you like, in people's usage. Your millennial mindset group. I don't like waiting for stuff. So, you know, if you can download something quickly, then it really supports the way they want to live. So I think it's going to be important for a lot of those types of apps.
Howard touched on a key one, which is the convergence. You take the gaming space, which today is basically console-based or PC-based at home, Fortnite games. That's going to evolve very quickly to being able to share your gaming experience from when you're at home on your console to your mobile device as you leave, playing the same game, having it interact in the same way and running that same component. Most people think of the gaming industry as short, sharp games that are successful for a few months. They're not. Go and look at the top 10 games from 2 years ago. They're basically the same top 10 games that are there now today, and people are loyal to those games for a long period. The convergence of fixed and mobile, creating that ability to move your experience around, will open up a whole set of new case studies and users for the mobile network.
So big opportunities for the mobile networks, particularly because connectivity is going to be key in things like gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality, and immersive experiences. This could lead you guys into a whole new kind of realm of being a key part of that value chain. Is that something you see as a huge opportunity for you in 5G? And will we see that reflected in the channel? Will we see virtual reality devices being sold in the channel?
We will. I think Brendan touched on it. It's all about partnerships. We learned that in IoT. You do joint product development with your customer. You know, if you're connecting a BMW car, they don't just buy a SIM and stick it in the car. There's a whole development piece of work to do around the telematics box and the services. Same with Amazon. And if you use an Amazon locker, that's using a cellular network to open the locker when you turn up to that. That's joint product development. We all have to learn those skills to start doing that. That creates the opportunity to create all these new applications. We need to learn to partner better. One of the big features of 5G is MEC, the ability to take cloud loads and distribute them around our network. Well, that means we need to partner with cloud providers, AWS, Azure, etc., and work out how to integrate them. You guys are seeing
declining revenues at your core revenues in voice and messaging, yet you're making massive bets and risks in infrastructure investment, etc. You know, where do you see the opportunity to get a return on some of that investment?
You know, I do think that a number of the use cases for 5G rely on getting compute and storage much closer to the customer.
So network edge computing.
Yeah, multi-access edge we would call it. And the advantage, you know, what we've got to make sure we do is that we correctly monetize the value of that for the operator that is providing it, rather than, you know, making it too freely available for an organisation based on the west coast of the US. And I think, you know, how we focus our thinking and innovation around that is going to be quite critical for our industry as we move from what you've just described to a period of revenue growth.
And, you know, we talked about video, we talked about gaming. Those are things that we do in part today. We see that on our networks today. Actually, the next big opportunity is, you know, if you take cities, UK cities, we did a study last year, UK cities could save £6 billion in efficiencies through traffic management systems, waste management systems, basically IoT on 5G. That's actually a really big opportunity, not just for us, but for the UK PLC. And that's something that, while we manage the hype in the short term and look at the bits that are near to us, how do we look further where some of those opportunities are?
Yeah, okay. Do think of your questions. I am going to come to you. There's one at the back there. Let's take that one before we move on to devices.
Hi, Adrian Barnard. I'm at the entrepreneurial edge of the industry, and as you talking about monetisation just there, a lot of interesting comments. Do you not see, unless you work jointly, not mentioning the word cartel or anything, but how can you maintain this envelope where you want to create a premium product using the business lounge analogy? I think it's very interesting. How will you stretch that revenue opportunity and get a return back before, again, the marketing department step in and offer it for free? And then, you know, you're just cannibalising, you're just pipes in the sky, and it's back to utility products and pricing. How are you going to manage this, given that you've got lots of investment to make?
I mean, I think your first point, which I spent quite a bit of time talking about last year, is I do think we as operators in the industry, particularly in the roles that we have, need to collaborate much more and share results of trials and, you know, almost work together against, or, you know, I mean, the over-the-top players we need to partner with really effectively, but make sure that it is a good partnership. And you know, there are few of them and many operators, and so therefore the many of us need to make sure that we are aligning ourselves. And you know, if you look at some of the industry initiatives like the Telecom Infra Project, like what we try to do through NGMN, you know, like what's happening a lot with the Wireless Alliance and the mobile industry coming closer together, I think we're getting better at it. I do think there's much more to do to make it easier for people who are at the entrepreneurial end of the industry to develop against, you know, APIs that we as an industry provide, rather than it having to go through somebody else that's doing that.
I think the idea of incubation of ideas is really important, and we have to be able to work with businesses to be able to do that, and that's all businesses. So big businesses, I mentioned the FTSE 100 initiative we had, but we've also got our WARA accelerators around the country, which are tech startup accelerators, and we're going to be putting 5G test beds in those areas so we can work with to try and see if we can generate those ideas, those entrepreneurial things that will come along and affect, you know, all of our lives. And that's really important, that you make it open enough for people to be able to play with it. And you've got to do that through partnership and collaboration.
Yeah. And actually, sorry, one quick point. I know
that's okay.
One credit to DCMS actually, in that they are doing a good job, I think, of investing money in incubating, you know, trials throughout the country, and particularly in public sector and in the enterprise space. And you know, and we're all sort of have our share of that, which is quite healthy, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on to sort of devices and sort of retail, etc. Let's focus on you guys here, because I think Mobile World Congress, the industry big, some call it a jamboree, but the big event that just happened a few weeks ago. Let's get some key takeaways from that on the device side, particularly. You know, I know Samsung. You'll obviously talk, Kate, about what Samsung was showing and the 5G devices that you guys. Ben, let's give an overview of what you saw in the pipeline of 5G devices and what really caught your eye and what's interesting, both from a margin perspective, etc.
It was massively encouraging. I mean, if you'd asked, if we'd been here a year ago and you'd said, okay, Ben, what are we going to see at Mobile World Congress in 2019 on 5G? I think I would have said, you know, maybe one device, bit clunky, bit thicker than the other stuff. You know, maybe 1.5 devices, depending on who rocked up. Went down to MWC. You know, I saw at least 13 different 5G devices. You know, some are more real than others. I'd say there's at least 5 or 6 5G smartphones pretty close and ready to roll. You've got Qualcomm, who are defining a lot of where 5G is going. They've worked very hard to get the standard accelerated, which has been quite a headache for these guys, in fairness.
Yeah.
But they've done that and they've achieved it. They're talking about 20 operators around the world, 20 device manufacturers, 30 design wins by the end of this year. There are also the kind of mobile broadband and the fixed mobile
routers and hubs, etc.
Fixed wireless access devices, which are coming too. In terms of so the products are there. Actually, I think there's more products than the operators need right now. So
what stood out? What stood out? In 5G terms.
In 5G terms, what stood out was the fact that there was a sheer number of devices from credible manufacturers like Samsung, like LG. Huawei are there with their own chipset solution. Samsung are there with their own chipset solution. That's another headache for these guys because it's 3 chipsets to certify. And the guys in the lab, one's hard enough, and having to do that in 2 or 3 months, which has never been achieved before on a generation of technology, will be tough. One notable thing though was Xiaomi coming in with their Mi Mix 3 5G, which is a 5G spin of an existing product, and there were gasps in the right way. Saying that that's €100 premium for that product, and
so
that's
what is it?
retail.
What's the price? What was the price?
€599. So that's €100 more than the 4G product. But remember, that's a retail price. So you've got to take taxes out of that. You've got to take distribution out of that. Yeah. That could mean they're saying €60 or something for 5G. Which, if you take the fact that you've got 2 chips into these early 5G devices are nothing like 4G devices. You've got
cameras, sensors.
Well, forget all that, because that's in all the other products. You've got a processor in there, which people know, like Snapdragon's a big brand that people know, and usually that has all the modem and everything integrated into it, but you have to have a co-located modem for 5G. Wow. You've got a really complex antenna architecture. You've got the RF front end. These are super expensive products, and I was, much as it's nice from a consumer perspective to see someone chasing an aggressive price like that, it's a nightmare for the other phone makers, because you could say they're kind of trashing the market a bit too soon. But it shows that gap on 4G and 5G is narrowing way faster than we anticipated, and we are going to get some terrific devices like this one that you can see.
Kate, tell us about is this the S10 5G?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I think, obviously you raised 2 points there. I think the difference between 4G to 5G device-wise is, I know when we first showed this to our operator partners, they actually didn't think it was real either. Because obviously, as Ben said, the 4G devices moving from 3G were really clunky, they were really thick. And there was quite a huge price differential as well with them. We haven't released the price on this yet, but what I can say is that we won't be charging a premium to move to 5G. The S10 5G actually is a different feature set to the S10 Plus, so it has a bigger screen, it's got a bigger battery, it's got a true depth camera in it, so that comes with some great experiences, both from a B2B and a B2C perspective, because that will actually take photos and then everything in the photo is measurable. So what we've made sure of is that we aren't just putting a 5G device out there with a premium on it. We've said, actually, let's look at the most likely use cases, which is going to be obviously screen consumption. Your power usage is definitely going to go up, so we need to make sure it's a bigger battery. So we've actually put a different feature set in our first device. We will be bringing more devices to market this year, so I think we'll be coming with a bigger range quicker than we did with 4G. And we'll be looking to hit different price points with that as well. So they're not all going to be just premium devices.
Are they coming, kind of fourth quarter, some of the 5G devices into retail?
Yeah, it'll be mixed. So this one we're launching obviously in summer at some point, and then you'll see more devices coming in the second half of the year.
So really, I look at smarts. I mean, I was at MWC, as I have been for 24 years, and I just look at the excitement around some of the devices in years gone by, and then the lack of excitement in this form factor. It's become very commoditized, very samey, little differentiation in terms of the form factor. And, as a result, replacement cycles have gone to, 3 years, and probably even extending. How are we going to re-energize excitement in devices when we're talking about incremental kind of things and leaps with data transfer, etc., with 5G? But foldable phones that's at MWC, is that a technology or a form factor that's in search of a market? The industry thinking up ideas like foldable phones, and at prices, I think we were talking, $2,600, $2,900 at.
Well, put the price thing to one side, because I've been really surprised by some of the things that have been written about the price of that product. New technology costs money. Kate won't comment, but I bet they're making more money on that product than they are on the folding one because, you know, it is an expensive product to make. Those of you who've been around long enough, 1985, when the Motorola 8000X came out, the phone that's famous from the Wall Street film, that was $4,000. So, you know, consumer electronics have a great habit of just sliding down the price curve. Foldable devices will be in the normal price range in 2021, 2022. What I was excited about, and I know having been to several Mobile World Congresses like you, the last year or so, or last few years, it's been quite kind of depressing to see this kind of sea of sameness of smartphones with foldable stuff, which is not really a 5G story, but I know it's a hot topic. The foldable stuff is just exciting to see the advent of some device diversity. But we're in the stone age of foldables. It's the first part. Yeah. But it's actually bigger. I think that the foldable, because the mobile phone market is so immense. This year, 1.8 billion mobile phones will be sold, 60 phones a second. Just try and think about just the logistics of that. The foldable stuff is started in mobile phones because it's such a big market. But actually, flexible screen technology means that every surface in our lives over the next 20 years can be a screen. So I'm super excited. We're going to see so much interesting new device design, and I think it is a bit of a solution looking for a problem, but like the 5G networks, we'll figure it out. Someone will figure out how you use that real estate. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so, what do we realistically think the premium across the board is across, not just with Samsung, obviously you've not released any prices, but what do you think the premium is going to be on sort of 5G? Has that shown Xiaomi product set a sort of a low benchmark, the others are going to try and catch up?
I think Kate's been quite frank insofar as they're not going to charge a big premium. I think everyone's going to, you want to make a bit of money on your new products. We've got the €100 benchmark, so that's kind of laid something down. But then there's going to be some incentives as well. I can't imagine the CEOs of any of these networks are going to want to stand up in the middle of Q1 when they're doing their fourth quarter results and say we've got 0 subscribers on 5G. So there'll be some incentive in the channel to push 5G through. That will help. How long you can command a premium on 5G, I think we've heard quite a clear story, which is don't necessarily think of it like that. Think of it as a network evolution. Yeah. You just, even if you can get the same amount of money from those people going forward, that would be a good starting place because we've seen so much price erosion. Yeah. So I don't think we have to panic that it's going to be obscenely expensive. Yeah. It's just the next phase, new technology is a little bit more expensive.
And so, what other form factors for 5G devices? I mean, I know you've been a huge fan of things like wearables in the past, which sort of almost felt like a little bit of a cycle that came and kind of went. But what did you see at MWC that might be other form factors other than phones? That might
other than phones. Well, I mean, the phone, the kind of rectangular monoblock. It's the kind of dominant design that's not going away.
No.
I think we've seen on the foldable side of things, just sticking with the phones, we've seen people kind of moving to this idea that you open the phone out. I actually think it's more like a tablet that shuts rather than a phone that opens. So you get that. I think it's quite interesting. The next step, and there's a whole host of different designs. We saw concepts at Mobile World Congress of phones that you can wrap around your wrist, for example, so it becomes kind of more of a wearable thing. Phones like this that fold in half, and there's ongoing rumours about Motorola, reviving the Razr and doing that, and we all know everyone in the industry loves a bit of nostalgia. HMD Global have traded well on that. Biggest story of 2 years ago at Mobile World Congress. Basic 2G phone. It's quite scary. And then in terms of other areas, I think then we move into radically different things like connected cars and other really small little devices, little trackers and sensors and those sorts of things, which will unlock great potential. But the phone's not going anywhere. That's here to stay.
Right. We have a question over here. Gentleman over here. Hand up. We'll try and do a few more questions from the floor because, God, it's amazing how quickly an hour goes when you've got guys like this in the room.
Good afternoon, Peter Conan-Ford from Viatech Associates. Going back to the networks themselves, a great part of the real estate is monopoles in suburban areas, which have got 2G, 3G, 4G. So what's the strategy to get 5G massive MIMO onto those and then connected with that? Where is all the 1 gigabit to 10 gigabit or 25 gigabit fibre going to come from, and what's the sort of strategy to get that out?
A good question for you, Howard.
No pressure. Well, I mean, as we said earlier, we are, we've done the designs now for what we need to do in terms of ensuring that we can take the extra weight on the antennas and that we can ensure that the ICNIRP in terms of radiation and distance from an antenna. So we've done that. We've built that into our capital planning. So we're working through that as we speak, and we will enjoy great 10 gigabit per second backhaul from my sister company, BT.
Great. Thank you. I think Ivan, where's Ivan? You had a question for me at the start and I didn't get back to you. So.
Sort of follows on from the question that was just asked. A bit like Ben, but I've been around for 4 technologies and we're now on the 5th, coming up to the 5th. What I've witnessed, and I have to apologise to everybody because I was in Vodafone in 84 to 2004, so I saw 3 of them in that period. We never actually finished building a single network. We actually always decommission the networks before we finish building them. And that's a really bad practice because it gives dreadful customer experience. And really, it's reassuring at one level because it's obvious that you would want to co-locate 5G and 4G sites because that gives you a head start. But that is by no means going to deliver a national network. And by no means will it deliver indoor coverage, which is still a major Achilles heel for some networks more than others, particularly those that didn't have the advantage of 900 meg spectrum or thereabouts. So for me, it's more a question of, it's great to hear all the hype about 5G, but not wanting to use a dreadful Corbynism. This needs to be for the many, not the few. And there are too many people for whom indoor coverage, and I don't live that far from London, I've not had indoor coverage the last 2 houses I've lived in, which are in quite, fairly densely populated areas. We've got to get to a mindset of delivering decent coverage available nationally. And I don't know whether the investment demand of 5G is going to distract us again from ever delivering a proper national network.
So that's a great question on the rural, the difference, the haves, the have-nots.
So can I
and also, I did want to ask you guys about 700 megahertz spectrum that's coming later this year, and what difference that's going to make.
Can I challenge that a little bit? First of all, we haven't turned anything off. We still run 2G, we still run 3G, we still run 4G, and now we're deploying 5G. That's one of the things we have to solve as an industry. We just turned off our pager network in the UK. I cannot tell you how difficult that was. Really? The escalations we got from politicians saying someone's still using their pager. Yeah, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
You're right, we need to use our resources and capabilities more efficiently. 5G helps us massively. We spend a huge amount of our money building capacity in dense urban areas to service the customers that are in those areas. If we can do that much more efficiently using 5G, that frees up funding and investment to deploy mobile networks in rural areas, etc. Well, let's be honest, commercially, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, there are not many people there. They don't pay for the services that they use, and therefore it's hard to build a case for that. The cheaper we can make our dense urban and urban networks, the more funding we have available to spread further out.
That makes economic sense.
And one of the great things about the partnership that we have for sharing networks is it allowed us to get to 98% population coverage in 4.5 years. And if you think back to the amount of time it took to roll out 2G and roll out 3G, to be able to do that at that pace, was a real game changer. And I think what you've seen with people being so excited by 4G, because it did deliver on the promise, but it did it in a quick enough timescale for it to perforate across the country. And I think that's really, really important, because that, as Scott said, then allows you to get coverage out there. And that's, when you look at what politicians, what they're really going for at the moment is rural connectivity. And we want to serve our customers, but serving swathes of land where there isn't anybody doesn't make any economic sense. So we have to find a way of being able to do that.
So is that 700 megahertz spectrum auction that's coming later this year going to help you deploy quickly? How quickly after the...
Yeah, 700 is super important from a coverage point of view. It's low band spectrum, so therefore covers larger distances. It's the spectrum that's available for us to do that with, and therefore is really important. What's critical is the structure of the auction and how that's put together. If it bundles it with mid-band and low-band, it creates different dynamics which are hard to value. If it's set up for 2 players to win, not 4 players to win, to maximise value for the government, then you create a very difficult situation where you have 2 networks with coverage and 2 networks without coverage. We've seen the damage that was done in Italy with that approach of essentially you've ensured that two networks can't launch 5G because they can't get the spectrum to do 5G. So the structure of the auction and the fairness with which it allows operators to build their networks is a big challenge.
But you can start, once those auctions have taken place, you can actually effectively roll out pretty quickly.
The equipment we deploy today for mid-band can deploy low-band. So once you own the spectrum, you can turn it on almost immediately.
I mean, I would add, I mean, I think we all recognise the total not-spot problem in the UK, which is about 9% of the landmass. We are certainly, pushing each other hard as to how we can work together to find an economic way to eat into some of that. There'll be 5% of the landmass of the UK that will absolutely never be worth covering.
Are you feeling political heat on national roaming?
We're feeling political heat on geographic coverage. It's less about the actual solution; it's about the problem. And we're talking and working together as to what's the most effective way as an industry to collaborate on providing solutions for that.
I'm very conscious we're actually slightly over time. I'm going to give someone an opportunity to ask the last question. If anybody has a burning question. I'm sorry, I can't see your hand. The other chap there. Yeah.
My name is Dr. Rajan Chada. Coverage is a very important issue. There's no question about it. And infilling and the rural connectivity is a huge issue. I've got two questions, if I may put to the panel. Number first is how you can develop a partnership with yourselves if there is a solution which can be rolled out, particularly 5G, without installation of large number of antenna masts, which are very expensive. And secondly, is that what we have seen, and I'm drawing the data from the United States, FCC, whereby during bad climate, high winds.
Could you just hold the mic a little bit closer? We're
Sorry, you can't hear.
To hear you.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Very succinctly.
If you could succinctly, because we are running out of time here.
So what I want to know is that if we have a solution which can, whereby we can roll out 5G without putting, expensive masts in a very short time, would you be interested? And how we can interface with yourselves? Thank you.
Yeah, of course we'd be interested. There's some emerging technologies around low orbit satellites, etc. But yes, of course we'd be... Building a mast is the most difficult part of our job. So yeah, anything that would avoid that, we're interested.
No, it's a ground-based systems, which we have recently got an intellectual property for that, and whereby it is possible, particularly in the area you're working, and we are more than happy to partner with yourselves. And
I guess you guys are going to be hanging around and maybe chatting offline. Thank you very much. Not really. No. It's lunchtime. I wanted to say thank you. I must have asked all the questions you guys were thinking because I didn't see too many hands, but you try and stop these guys leaving the room if you've got any further questions. Now, I want to say thank you because I think that's been a fantastic discussion. I think also a really sort of amazing spirit and not trying to claim too much above the competitors. It's been a great discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very good.